Hello everyone, and welcome to Starzoo Valley. Part 1 of it anyway. I love Planet Zoo. It's one of my favourite games, and despite what my skill at it may imply, I've played it for years. I've played campaign zoos, I've played campaign zoos but properly, I've made my local zoo, I've made theme zoos, I've made kind of realistic zoos, I've made beautiful, vibrant zoos. But anyone who's played the game for a while would know that once you've made enough nice habitats, building major projects starts to feel a lot like work. And they inevitably die. This is because, in the end, not many of us truly have dream zoos that we'd like to bring to life, and there's only so many ways you can build a rock wall and viewing area before it starts to feel like a bit much. Again, I love the game, so I keep coming back when I want to go into my comfortable build something space, but they all peter out after a few exhibits. Given I'm not as skilled as the professional grade people you see on YouTube, I don't really have it in me to complete amazing, breathtaking, realistic and cohesive locations. So I've had a revelation. Remove the creativity and just build other games in the game. It gives me theming, a set goal, a set layout, and reduces the importance of getting each exhibit to look like some masterful work of art. It's perfect. Of course, my first idea for this was Dark Souls, but it took me about 45 seconds to recognise that not only is that way too hard for a first idea, it's also impossible to fit into the map while keeping something close to one-to-one scale, and Planet Zoo itself isn't remotely suited to Lordran's design as you can't stack exhibits on top of one another, whereas Dark Souls' whole claim to fame is that stacked lasagna layout. I still want to do it, but that'll be in a different game with a lot of abstraction. So instead I've come here, to Starzoo Valley, a game with a cozy scale which actually fits in the Planet Zoo map space almost perfectly when comparing scale. It has no vertical stacking, and has a simple art style which makes for a good first try, and it's still an instantly recognisable world. It's ideal! With that said, this is still a huge undertaking, so as such I'll likely only be covering one area per video, depending on scale. I'm thinking it'll be about 9 videos long thinking about the various locations. I've started with the Cindersap forest as it's the lowest point on the map, giving me a rock-solid starting location. It is, however, very large and open, so it's covering a lot more habitats and space than most of these will. The focus is definitely on the world layout and covering various concessions and edits I've made rather than the exhibits themselves, which will be flat, fairly lifeless things as per Starzoo's flat and basic style. The main concessions are that buildings in Starzoo are TARDISes, with their interiors being dramatically larger than their overworld space. As such, I will not be building interiors as it's impossible. With that said, buildings will be the primary covers for zoo essentials like keeper huts, power and water and guest facilities. This will limit where and how robust I can make these things be, hopefully resulting in some interesting workarounds. The game is also a fixed perspective, so I'm willing to claim that there are caves hidden within cliff faces you can't actually see, and our Starzoo protagonist is just too scared to go in the dark. Again, these will only be decorated to the point where they look mildly acceptable from a street view look from the actual park. The last main concession, which we won't see much of just yet, is that the map doesn't exactly link up, so I'll be moving some things around and building linking territory between the implied scenes. Hopefully this will go well, but it could get fiddly once we start dealing with the minecarts and desert bus lines which we'll need to interact and head through existing areas. There's also one link between the beach and Cindersap which doesn't exist in the game, which I just think it should be there, you know, so I'll be adding that. At any rate, I'm not into speed build content, so I'm not going to be showing you how I made all this junk. We'll just be going on an on-foot tour and I'll point out things that were interesting or irritating to make and the changes I've made along the way. So let's go for a walk. So we're going to start at the farm entrance, which may not be the ideal location because since we haven't made the farm, there's nothing here just yet. The backing of this large tree area will look a lot nicer once we've gotten all that backing wall in, but for now, it's just a big blank expanse. This little area shows 2 of the constraints I've had to deal with. First is that there aren't any real paths in Cindersap, so since I want this to feel both like Starzoo Valley and feel like a functional zoo, I've had to get a little bit subtle with implied walking path design. At this exact moment, we've got an easy sand and grass delineation, so it's pretty easy to tell, but in future I'll need to highlight it more through having areas look more overgrown with longer grass or scattered sticks and rocks, which you can see a little bit here, but it'll be clearer soon. The other one is that Starzoo doesn't have any angled fences, so all my fence lines have to use this kind of jagged stepping model. This means I need to do a little more work with filling in these corners so they don't feel quite so much like Lego blocks. And I also really don't want to put the paths right up to the fences all the time to help carry over that fence of being in a roomy open space, so having some larger spaces like this will help with that. Due to this being a zoo that functions to some degree, I will need to give guests food, which means rubbish, which means they need bins. There aren't many of these outside of the town in the game, but you need so many that I've been forced to give people this basic little setup a bunch of times. I can, and occasionally do, hide them in trees and rocks, but honestly, we need so many of them that giving up and having a repeated, fairly fitting thing like this is the best option. This setup is also handy for giving that implied path structure in the wilder areas. There isn't a whole lot to say about this solo beyond this top cap, which I built out of little signs which I thought looked quite nice. It turns out they're electric and light up at night, and since there's like 160 of them in there, and I screwed up my item grouping so badly that there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to turn them off, I now have a silly light up orb in the night sky. Marnie's rant itself is pretty straightforward. Basic shape, only a few things to really customize. I like how the door, window shades, and animal water trough worked out. Not so much the fat chimney, which is definitely too beefy. I have a soft spot for my hidden donation bin inside a barrel and bucket for no particular reason. I just think it's cheeky with a little bit of overhang. Functionally, it's very basic. It holds food and drink for the populace and the entrance to the habitat. Which leads me to my next light rule. I want animals to suit their locations in regard to Starzoo Valley. In this particular case, it's very straightforward since cows and sheep are exactly what Marnie has, but with the more fanciful selections, I also want them to try to fit in a little bit. Most of this will come down to only having predatory animals where enemies are, but there's a few more specific ones around. If Marnie's place is basic, Leah's is embarrassingly so. It's a tiny, 4-square house with some power and water treatment hidden inside. Her decoration changes a lot per the season in Starzoo, and I've made some kind of unholy blend of multiple of them in an attempt to make something at least somewhat interesting to look at. The view from her place is largely ruined by my animal choice for the water region in front of her. I went with the platypus because I want otters in the main town area, so they felt like a suitable replacement. But they're tiny and they don't live in large groups, so you're just never going to see anything. One change I did make from the game is the removal of the stone thing in her yard, because honestly, I don't know what it's supposed to be. What are you? I also have nothing living in a yard at this stage because it's simply too small. Once I build the imaginary joining path to the town, I may be able to extend it enough for something to live there, but for now, it just doesn't fit. If there's a view ruined by something that's not my fault, it's the first bridges area. With such a large unbroken body of water, I wanted something which is heavy breeding to a massive population and could spread out. So as they're aquatic birds with a herd cap of 80, I went with cranes, and these big idiot birds just won't get in the darn water. I've checked the traversable area a million times, they just won't get off their little strip of land no matter how sweetly I beg. Get in the water. Get in the water. Get in the water! As for the rest of the bridges, they're pretty annoyingly different. Due to how much room Planet Zoo demands around a floating path, I needed to raise the bridges above the habitat separations, so we have these ugly mounds everywhere. Removing this path void is basically my number one for the sequel, but for now, this is what we get. Then, quite obviously, I didn't water table check my land height, so the lake is far lower down than it should be, and trust me, this gets worse. I've learned my lesson. I just already completely raised and shaped all my land before I realised, and I don't have it in me to reset. I'll do better in future, I promise. Not in the rock work though, I just hate that and I have no desire to improve, sorry. Lastly, of course, is the fact that it's a nice sizable bridge instead of some rickety planks. Maybe Planet Zoo will have some custom paths, but until then, we're stuck with what we've got. I tried putting some extra planks out, but it just does not look good. As punishment for the game not letting me do what I want so much in that segment, we're off to our first major modification zone. In Starzoo, there is a fence right up along here, straight through this one-armed woman, blocking you off for no comprehensible reason. The beach also has a blocked off path which could point over here, arbitrarily stopping us from making that direct route. I'm adding it back because you have no power here, concerned ape. But obviously, that will be once we've made the beach and we have something to connect it to. So for now, all it has is the path to my hideous and ramshackle make money and get people in temporary entrance because we haven't even made the entrance bus yet. But we don't tell people of what lives down that road. The cliff face here is also a big den of lies. In this tiny area, I have 3 separate reality-bending alterations. I've got a cozy cove for my pangolins to go hide in because I got annoyed of them being protested all the time due to stress. The whole thing is hollow so I can hide an entire staff building complex. And I've got a little jutting out hidden by height spot so people can get some food and money and go poop right there on the floor. There's also this little food stand I built early on and thought I might resort to, but I think it's cheating and unnecessary, so it'll be the only one. The longer side cliff face is less full of lies, but at least my biggest shame in this whole project and I just don't have the heart to repair it. The little food and drink cave is fine using the protagonist to scare to the dark logic, and I do like that it's the first example of making somewhat subtle but recognisable paths, but this big raised mound gives away how badly I messed up the ocean front. As we head down to the sewer entrance that I'm actually quite proud of, you'll quickly see that A, I truly despise rockwork and steadfastly refuse to improve, and B, that this cliff is tiny. Basically, right at the very start of all of this, I set my terrain build tool to 8 meters. But when you do that, it actually measures out the size from the midpoint of your tool for some reason. So instead, our mighty ocean-breaking wall is only 4 meters tall. This is plainly too small, but I didn't notice until I'd already built basically the whole region and started making my cliff face rocks. There is no chance I'm ever fixing it for the sake of my own sanity. No offense to my cassowaries, bongos, and pygmy hippos, but their habitats are pretty basic yards with no particular notes. So we're going to run through that to the hat shop for our next piece of construction, with a brief stop to scowl at our useless birds, of course. The hat shop was actually the first thing I made, and I'm quite happy with it. I like the wall behind the broken boards, giving the holes in the wall some shadowing. I like how the little shed works as a staff entrance for all the stuff hidden inside. I like that I can make it literally a hat shop. This is also one of the areas I was selective with my animal choices. With the hat shop salesman being a mouse, I decided to go with rodents as the attached exhibit. So we've got prairie dogs here. Sadly for the other one here, I struggled to find more viable rodent-esque creatures. I have locations for meerkats and capybaras already, so I just threw up my hands and dropped in badgers for no particular reason, rewarding them with the lowest effort, worst looking enclosure in the whole zoo. At the very least, I was kind enough to hide some hard shelter in these conspicuous paired trees, given there's no buildings or cliffs to hide any in. This area also provides the worst view, but once I build the event field, this horrible vista will be greatly improved. Jumping ahead to the back end of our tour because everything in between is just forest, we have this little forest path leading up to the Wizard's Tower. I had some trouble figuring out a balance between utilising space for habitats and having it still feel like an open forest walk, but I'm happy enough with the result. I'm less happy with this jutting out guest needs area, simply because I again made this mountain sequence too short and things don't fit in properly. I am, however, extremely happy with how the Wizard's Tower worked out. Sure, I could have used smaller bricks, but dealing with the need to rotate each interlocking square and having it come out like this, along with having to custom build all the windows and other decorations, I really couldn't be happier with the result. I even stuck frogs inside so people have an excuse to come check it out. For our final segment, we have our travelling merchant and the jetty at the lake. There's no pig statues, and the hat is the wrong type, but I'm pleased with getting something like our little worker pig friend in here. Planet 2's assumed resizing ability would come in wonders with not having to put a bicycle wheel on an old-timey pulled cart, but we make do. While generally speaking, the two games have matched up very nicely in scale, with one Starzoo tile basically matching up to a 4 meter grid piece in Planet Zoo, the jetty does feel exceedingly large while matching the dimensions I've used throughout this video. I could resize it down by a few meters, but I can't be bothered. On the plus side, the capybaras here do actually make use of their pond, and often duck over to say hello. And that's it. Obviously, I could walk you through every bit of the path and show off every habitat, but that'd take 25 minutes, and it would be fairly boring because, as you can see, the habitats themselves are quite simple. Our next segment will be the farm, which, while smaller, is a lot denser with something around a dozen structures I'll need to build and place more freely. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll see you once it's done. Apologies for the frame rate.